Scheduled programming to bring you an update about that mass shooting in Beaufort County over the weekend. 20 people were shot on St. Helena Island. 4 of them are dead. The Beaufort County Sheriff PJ Tanner finally giving us an update this morning. Let's listen in.
And today I am going to do my best to try to answer any and all questions you may have about the incident that occurred late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. But let me just go back and just kind of give you a little bit of overlay as to where we're at now and how we got to where we're at. So Saturday night, Sunday morning, there was a shooting at Willie's Bar and Grill on Martin Luther King Boulevard and intersection of US 21. I got the call about 1:25. I arrived on scene about 2:30. 2:15, 2:30, and I was able at that time to walk the crime scene with Master Sergeant Duncan, who's the case officer on this case, to get a feel of exactly what we are going to be investigating over a period of time. You know, I've been to many crime scenes in my career. This, unlike others, we had an event at this particular nightclub, bar, restaurant, and reported to us was 500, 600, possibly 700 people attended this event. Everyone was socializing, everyone was having a good time. I know that there was an event that was within that day or days leading up to Saturday night, Sunday morning, some type of class of 2000 homecoming after party. And I know that the flyer that was sent out had October the 10th as the date that was for the event. But here we are into Saturday night, Sunday morning, and we had a lot of folks just socializing, having a good time, spending time with friends and family members at an event that could be connected to a homecoming event for a class of 2000, 25 years ago. During that event and closer to closing time, because I think the owner indicated that he was about to give everyone notification that they would be closing, kind of a last call type thing that you would find in those type of settings, shots rang out, multiple shots. And as a result of those gunshots, 20 people were shot. 4 were killed, 4 were critical, and the others that received injuries were either transported by EMS or found independent rides or drove themselves to Beaufort Hospital and area hospitals. So we were very thankful, based on the event, that Beaufort City Police helped us by maintaining order at the Beaufort Memorial Hospital. We had law enforcement from Port Royal PD, of course the Sheriff's Office, the South Carolina Highway Patrol, all responding to this call. The scene is horrific. And you know, those type scenes in a parking lot in an area that is well known to all of us in Beaufort County, and just down the road from Penn Center, were 4 bodies, 4 souls that had been lost to senseless gunfire. And crime scenes don't get better. It takes a long time, and I know that a lot of the victims' families were there, and they stayed with us at the scene until we completed our work there. That actually it was in the morning hours of Sunday when we were able to complete our job on scene. Several shell casings were collected. There was a lot of evidence that was collected at the crime scene. The crime scene unit did a wonderful job of processing that scene in a timely fashion. Even though I know a lot of people that aren't used to going to crime scenes or working in law enforcement, a lot of folks don't understand at times how methodical and how meticulous you have to be and working a scene like that, especially when you've had, where there were so many people attending this function. We have 4 lost souls, and we have multiple shell casings throughout. What other evidence that was being collected? And we try to do those things in a timely fashion, but unfortunately we have to be, again, methodical in the process that we have. When that scene was cleared early Sunday morning and the evidence was collected, then of course not only then, but prior to that, we had investigators and sheriff's deputies that were interviewing anyone and everyone that could possibly have information related to this particular incident. You know, these type of gatherings, I'm asked several times, and I've been asked over the past several days, Sheriff, are we safe? Are we safe in our community? Are there suspects afoot? Are there suspects that have not been arrested and in custody and charged with these horrific crimes? And it's a difficult answer to give, because we know, based on the unfolding of the event on Saturday night, Sunday morning, with a large crowd of folks, we know that there were 2, possibly 3 within this crowd that had an ongoing feud with each other. And as a result of this ongoing feud, this disagreement, this inability to communicate like we're doing now, they resorted to pulling guns and exchanging gunfire. And as a result of that, 20 people were injured. 4 lost their lives, and we have several that are still trying their best to recover from gunshot wounds that were sprayed in a crowd, but intended for a particular person. The unfortunate thing is that when that many shots are fired in a crowd of a volume of people that we had, multiple people get injured. Multiple people died, multiple people were injured, and they're still recovering from their injuries. So this crime scene just continues. It continues today. Even though we are not at Willie's Bar and Grill, we are still investigating a lot of evidence that is incoming to the sheriff's office. On Sunday afternoon, several hours after I left the crime scene on St. Helena, I had a meeting at our law enforcement center on Ribault with the U.S. Attorney's Office, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, our investigators, our legal team, and others to put a game plan together and to focus on what happened leading up to, during, and after the shooting at Willie's Bar and Grill. That is an ongoing process. We have evidence that's being processed today at not only the forensics lab, our lab in Beaufort County. We're getting assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've had conversations with Mark Keel, the chief of SLED. We have evidence going to SLED today at 1 o'clock that are for firearms analysis, because one of the things that we don't do in Beaufort County is we don't do any kind of firearm analysis work. So all of that's being done. Mark Keel has been very, very helpful in making sure that the lab makes it a priority on the evidence that we deliver today. We have some firearms that are going to SLED. We have projectiles from the victims, and we have shell casings from the scene. So they'll spend their time here over the next days, possibly into the next week, analyzing all of that evidence that we sent to them. Not only are they analyzing evidence at the SLED lab, but again, the FBI is helping us with some video clarification. They have the technology in place to do a lot more than we are able to do with some video that has been retrieved. And then our lab here in Beaufort County is doing most of the DNA work that's required for connectivity. So all of that's in process. All of these, not only the federal partners, but our state partners and our county and local law enforcement in Beaufort County are working around the clock to try to resolve this issue, find those that are responsible for this crime, and hold them accountable. And I will field your questions, but understand that if I can't answer it, don't take it as an insult. It's just a reality. I cannot release any information that would impede the investigation or prematurely identify anything that is currently being worked. So having said that, questions?
Sheriff, what have your analysis shown about the concentration of crime, and particularly violent crime in marginalized communities such as in St. Helena, Burton, and North Beaufort, and how are you tailoring your resources accordingly?
Well, the resources that we have in Beaufort County are not only the Sheriff's Office, but our other law enforcement partners in the county, but also we have our partners with SLED, the State Law Enforcement Division, the South Carolina Highway Patrol, and our federal partners, like I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Attorney's Office. Of course, we have the FBI that works a lot in Beaufort County with us. We have those partnerships in place, and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and all those are critical partners when we're looking at how we make charges, what charges are made, and what jurisdiction those charges can be prosecuted. I've had multiple conversations with Solicitor Stone over the past couple of days. Matter of fact, every day, multiple times a day since Sunday. He's prepared. He assures me today that he's prepared to handle the charges that are brought forward when arrests are made. But until we get to that point, we're crossing T's and dotting I's, because those requirements are not only in place to make an arrest, but we have to look at this case from the ground up. So the ground up is that whatever cases we make, whatever evidence that we collect, and how that evidence is contributed to different people responsible for this crime, all of that will end up in a courtroom. And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to victimize these families a second time by not doing the job that has to be done, and it has to be methodical and it has to be meticulous. So all of those things are time sensitive, and I'm not a patient person. You can ask my staff and they'll tell you my patience is thin, and I'm demanding things to be done, and they're expediting things. But at the same time, I always hold myself back, and I understand, based on my career and the fact that I've been an investigator as well, I understand the importance of crossing T's and dotting I's. Folks, you kind of need to know we've got a problem in Beaufort County. And this problem didn't pop up Saturday night, Sunday morning. And in a lot of things, it kind of gets lost in translation. Not only, and I'm not blaming the media or anyone else, but in the past year and a half, Beaufort County Sheriff's Office has made 24 arrests on possession of machine guns. 24 in a year and a half. 6 are still in jail. 18 are out on bond. A bond that you would laugh at. And it's not funny. A bond that allows those that we have been dealing with for years, and we chase them every week, every weekend, that are out on bond for possession of a machine gun. No one should possess a machine gun.
Sheriff, why do you believe that these are predominantly young African American men? Why do you feel that they feel the need to be armed so heavily?
You know, there are several key components to that. Some of this is gang connectivity. The other is not only related to the gang activity that we do have, but it's also connected to social media. A lot of this is connected to Facebook and other platforms that are used on a day-to-day basis by this age group. And it's not a race issue. This is not, and I know your question is indicated more to a particular group in Beaufort County or particular race in Beaufort County, but this is countywide, this is statewide, this is national. So we have got to do a better job of getting a better grip on the gang activity and how that not only affects Beaufort County, but affects other counties in South Carolina and throughout this country. And these young men and women honestly feel like they need to be heavily armed to protect themselves. It's not to protect themselves against law enforcement. It's to protect themselves against people that they're enemies with because of a comment that was made on Facebook, where someone has felt that they have been disrespected, and then now it's their job and their role to gain that respect. And it's their reputation that they find that's in question. So there are a lot of folks that are having different issues, not necessarily associated with Facebook, but feel like they have been offended or a criminal act has been committed against themselves, and they won't reach out to law enforcement. And I tell you, there's a lot of cases that we've worked with, some drive-by shootings and some other homicides, where investigators will go to the victim and said, all right, tell us who shot you, tell us what happened, and tell us who saw it and witnessed it, and you're gathering information. And the comment that we get is, I didn't see anything, I don't know who shot me, and don't worry about it, I'll take care of it myself. That's the kind of issues that we're dealing with. And then what leads to the next thing that we deal with is a retaliatory shooting or retaliatory incident that occurs for retaliation. So, I mean, those are the things. Now, can we do better with making sure that when we arrest people and provide the evidence to the court, such as possession of a machine gun, can we do better by setting a better bond? Sure we can. Can prosecutors, not only with the federal system, but also the state system, do a better job of maybe dealing with these cases in a time? Sure, but I'm not here to point fingers at the prosecutors or the judges. The reality is it takes all of us to do better. We need to do our job. Everyone needs to do our job. Y'all are doing y'all's job by being here and taking what information I can give you and relaying this information to the general public, because it is imperative. We had 700 people at this party, and we have yet to get a witness that can tell us who the shooters are. It's ridiculous to even think of that. But the reality is that's what we're doing. So it is imperative that all of those and all of this outlet here with our media and all of our social media that we push out encourage citizens to call us. We have avenues of getting information to law enforcement. You can remain anonymous. We need the information. The more information we get, if you have videos, if you have any information that you may not think is very important, we need to analyze it, we need to vet it, because those things are everything that comes together. You have a question in the back here.
Yes, sir. You mind if I approach? My name is Lafayette Weber, and I'm an independent activist from Jasper County.
Okay.
And President Trump warned us about this the first time he ran for president. President Trump has troops on the ground in Chicago now for the same problem right here. Okay? For years, this folder is full of obituaries of our young black kids over in Jasper County, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we are living under a very dangerous and corrupt judicial system. This is not fiction, this is facts that's been going on for over 100 years in this state. And as an activist, I have done the legwork to find out where this is coming from. And this is coming from our state elected officials and judges that's putting these kids back on the street to destroy black folks and their communities. This is not a bar problem. I ran a bar. and shut it down because of the drug problem that he never mentioned, the drug problem. 99% of the murders across America is because of drugs. Because prosecutors, these local magistrate judges, putting these people back on the streets, y'all. And it's time to stop it. President Trump needs to come in. He needs to go all over America and stop this stupid, ridiculous conspiracy to kill black people. Thank you for your time.
I'll interrupt to ask for some clarification there. What do we know about the suspects? Were they out on bond? What type of weapons did they have? Where are you in catching these suspects? Because there was a lot of different things talking about Facebook disputes. What can you clarify is fact from what we just spoke about?
Well, unfortunately, I can't make any clarification on that because I would be talking about the investigation and I would be identifying things that I cannot identify at this time. Yes, a great question, and I wish I could answer it. I have the information, but unfortunately, I can't share it with you.
Would the weapon, being able to discuss a little bit more about how many rounds were fired,
No.
you know, none of that?
No. Those are critical things to kind of hold to our, close to our chest because those are the things, information-wise, we're seeking from witnesses to validate the truth and veracity of a statement. So.
And, you know, we've said no threat to the public initially, but now do you feel like there is a threat if somebody is out running around in Beaufort County that's a suspect in this case?
Well, and I know I went there a few minutes ago, but I didn't complete that comment. And it's another great question. I cannot tell you that you're safe in Beaufort County. I'll give you an example. If 700 people went to Willie's Bar and Grill to socialize with friends, and out of the 700, 2, possibly 3, had a dispute or issue with each other, and they pulled out guns and started just shooting, and where a crowd of others were there and 20 people were injured, you have to ask yourself, events such as this, and the sad thing about it is we're coming up on the holiday season where families gather, where people socialize and rejoice the holiday and rejoice each other. And these are things you have to be conscious of. Now, granted, having events such as that at your home and in relatives' homes aren't the same as having a crowd of 500, 600, 700 people at a nightclub type setting where alcohol is being consumed, and things happen in those environments that are hard to control. You can control things at your own home, but when you go out in a setting like this and there's a consumption of alcohol and maybe other drugs and other things that are going on, things flare up. And when they flare up and people are armed, and that's when we find that in most cases, if you and I have a dispute about something, like the question you asked, we're going to talk about it. But disputes today with some of our younger generation, they don't have the ability to discuss things and talk things out. If they feel like their reputation is been harmed in some way, then they go at it in a revenge setting and they pull guns and start shooting. You have a question?
Yeah, sure. So you've said a couple of times that what preceded the shooting was an ongoing dispute, a couple of people who may have exchanged fire. You also mentioned that their firearm is being forensic survey of the firearm, which leads me to believe you have a fairly good idea about who's involved in this.
And we do.
Okay.
And we do. I can't name the person or how many, but we do. We have a lot of information, but the information we have is going to have to be supported by the processing of evidence. And when that evidence is processed, and of course it codifies what knowledge we have, and then we're able to move forward from there.
You guys have run-ins with them in the past?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that.
I'll ask this because you mentioned a little bit about gang problems in this, and you said Beaufort County has a problem. Can you finish that sentence for us of what that problem is?
Well, the problem's been a growing trend over the years, and we've seen not only a growing trend of local gangs, and we've had local gangs for the past 20, 30 years that have never really have internally managed themselves to be a threat to the society. It was more of a street name, or when I say a street name, a local address in the community, or just a local theme. But we've seen some connectivity here over the past months of national gangs that have an impact. And we've seen some activity that suggests that we have gang activity that's connected to other states, not only that are neighboring states to us, but also states that are a good distance away. And the connectivity there is very, very concerning.
Would you classify this incident as gang activity?
It's yes and no. The dispute was between 2, possibly 3 known people that know each other, that grew up in Beaufort County. So it's kind of hard to say that this was a gang incident when we know that what led up to the disagreement prior to this incident was not gang related. So it's a yes and no. I mean, it's hard to put an answer on that when I'm trying to withhold information. I know it's difficult to it would be easier for me to stand up here and just tell you everything I know, other than to dance around what I do know to try to protect this investigation. But unfortunately, that's what I have to do.
Sheriff, can you define what a switch is?
It's a conversion of a gun to take it from semi-automatic to fully automatic. Questions?
Were those the type of guns that were believed to be used in the shooting that were sent off the sled?
We know guns were used, and we have guns that are being sent to SLED, but I'm not going to go into any detail. And the forensic services need to be done, and the ballistics testing needs to be done by a lab on those to certify what that gun is.
Sheriff, to the best of your knowledge, is this the deadliest shooting that you're aware of in Beaufort County in its history?
As far as the number of people that were injured, yes. As far as fatalities or homicides at a particular scene, no. But this is to my knowledge, the best I can remember, and Mike, I mean, we've been in this business a long time. I don't recall where we had 20 victims of gunshot wounds at a particular incident.
What is the status of some of those victims? Are they still, I know 4% critical, are those still critical today?
And I don't know the status. I know that I think 2 of the 4 that were critical initially are a lot better today than they were Sunday. So I know that we have spoken to the majority of the victims of the 20, and some of them have very minor injuries, and there are others that are more serious and more critical.
And I'm guessing are some of the injuries also have to do with there being 700 people, like tranquil injuries or pushed out of the way, other than just gunshot, or are they all gunshot?
No, the 20 that we've identified is gunshot victims. And the gunshots for some or of course are fragments more than anything else, but doesn't matter. You're still a victim of a gunshot. So when we're working cases, and Daniel and I had this conversation several times this morning. I mean, we're looking at a case where we have 4 homicides, 4 murders, but the other 16 is going to be assault and battery, high and aggravated nature. Because
is there a reason you pursue that as opposed to attempted murder?
Well, and that's been my debate with, of course, not only the solicitor, but also Daniel, is that, and they can go into the technical terms of transferred intent and all the other stuff that they can talk about it. I don't think it's the right time to talk about it. I think when we get closer to making charges and we make the appropriate charge, then those things can be debated or they can be questioned. But we know what our focus is, and our focus right now is to find those that are accountable for this event and charge them appropriately based on the evidence that we have to make that charge.
Is there a belief that the suspects might have fled the state or the area, has there been coordination with outside agencies, maybe other states, to see if they can be found elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we have all that information. Thank you.
How common are these sort of customized guns, and how accessible are these switches, and maybe how much ammunition do they actually allow you to be able to convert a weapon to?
I mean, all those are great questions. You know, the switches are becoming extremely popular. And obviously, the access to these switches are easier than maybe some years ago. But ammunition, you can buy ammunition anywhere.
Do they allow you to hold?
If they have an extended magazine, then you can hold more ammunition, yes. The capacity level increases.
And are these things that can be found fairly easy?
Fairly easy. You know, and a lot of guns that circulate within the county, quite frankly, are in unlocked vehicles stolen out of glove boxes and consoles. So I mean, there's a lot of these guns that are floating around here that weren't. A lot of these guys and gals didn't go to a gun shop and buy a gun, fill out the ATF paperwork and fill out all the other required paperwork and have the background check and all that. They buy them on the street. They buy from each other. They trade them. I mean, there's just a process in that. But the switches are absolutely concerning. And we're just seeing more of them. Again, I go back in the last year and a half, 24 arrests, independent guns with switches that made them fully automatic. That within itself, in a year and a half in Beaufort County, raises the flag. Yes, sir.
So I'm here as an advocate on one of the victims. She was my niece.
Right.
And I want to know if the public record serves me right. Has there been an arrest made from that night at all? And is this person still in custody, or are they out in the public?
No, we have not made an arrest on anyone because of the incident from Saturday night, Sunday morning.
Not an arrest regarding that incident. There was no one arrested that night or the next day that went to another hospital or anything. And was it Beaufort County? Because public records show that someone was arrested.
Well, we've made multiple arrests over the past several days because we've got a lot of information that's coming in that we weren't getting before this incident at Willie's Bar and Grill, but we have not charged anyone with the crimes from Saturday night, Sunday morning.
So possible charges could be coming to some of these people?
No, there are charges coming to people responsible, but I can't go into any detail about who those people may be. I know there's some connectivity that social media is trying to do, and I think the media to...
It's public records, you look on Beaufort County love basis, you see.
Well, I mean, the charges you're referring to are on people from a case prior to the incident Saturday night and Sunday morning. It's a previous investigation. Great question, Doug.
Yes, my name is Ben Ross, and I want to give my condolences to all the families who've been impacted by this tragedy. And on behalf of the Battle Creek Alumni Association, we had a tailgate celebration for baseball. Over 1,200 people, no drama, no argument, everybody having a great, lovely time. Amongst the mud and rain, we had an awesome time. The correction I want to get straight, the alumni, Battle Creek alumni members had nothing to do with the tragedy that happened at Villas. That's what I want to get straight. The purpose of the tailgate is to raise money and donate Battle Creek and Rio Branch High for the band and equipment and stuff they need. I just want to get that straight. The Battle Creek Alumni Members Association had nothing to do with the tragedy. And again, my condolences to all the family who have been impacted by this situation. And closing this club ain't gonna solve the situation. Thank you. Just wanted to correct that. Thank you.
Hey, Sharon,
Can you say where the shooting occurred? Kind of give us a sense. We know it was outside, but where did it happen and how close were the people involved, and just kind of set the scene for us?
Well, I mean, have you been to,
Yes.
you have. So the shooting was in the parking lot near the front steps of the facility.
And how close were the,
I won't go into any details about, how close we think the shooters were to each other. I will tell you, and you've been there, you've seen it, you've seen pictures of it, I'm sure, as well. But the shooting occurred in the parking lot in front of the main steps that lead up to the business. Questions?
Sheriff, did you guys recover any video from Willie's Bar and Grill for like exterior, I guess, security cam?
And I would be talking about evidence, and I'm not going to talk about it, but good question. Thank you.
Sheriff Tanner,
Yes, ma'am.
my name is Dr. Cynthia Gregory Smalls. I'm a former retired educator.
Yes, ma'am.
The incident that happened on St. Helena, first let me give my condolences to the family because one of those members are related to me by marriage. So I just want to say, can we have more of these meetings? What you're doing now, excellent. But could we have more of them? And for maybe some of the police force, individuals on your force, can come out and speak to these young men and women on more frequent occasions,
Sure.
rather than having an occasion such as this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Sure. So out front of Willie's, I think there's 700 people. Were there, I mean, that just seems somewhat problematic to begin with. Was there a call for service to help disperse any of that? Was there patrols that were passing by that area that night?
Well, I mean, you have to look at the property as a whole. I'm sure you've been there. So you not only are you looking at the front of the business, but you're
All right, and again, that was Beaufort County Sheriff PJ Tanner. He is wrapping up this morning, giving us an update on this mass shooting that happened on St. Helena Island over the weekend. I think some of the biggest points that he made, he's been doing this job for a very long time, and he mentioned time and time again how this crime scene was unlike any other he's ever seen. It was horrific. 20 people were hurt, 4 people killed, and 4 were in critical condition. He did mention that he knows that 2 of those people who were in critical condition, they are better today than they were on Sunday. So good news, of course. And something that he mentioned also that I thought was very interesting, 700 people. That is the estimated amount of people that were at this gathering at Willie's Bar and Grill late Saturday night into very early Sunday morning, gathering together as alumni of a local high school. 700 people, and not one person has come forward to tell the sheriff's office any sort of evidence that they saw, anything that somebody else might have saw. And so the biggest plea from the sheriff's office this morning is that they are asking you, if you have any information, to please come forward. They do not have any arrests in this case still, so that is, of course, another big update here. Sheriff PJ Tanner, he says that there is likely a feud between 2 or 3 people. They're not able to completely specify. This is still a very active investigation that they are looking into. However, he did tell us that these 2 or 3 people, they did know each other, so this was a domestic issue. They are from Beaufort County, so they are from the area. And the problem here is that they went to guns to solve this problem. They were trying to shoot at each other, and then they shot into a crowd of a bunch of innocent people who were there gathering and trying to celebrate an alumni party. So again, the FBI is helping. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, they are also helping. They are processing evidence right now, trying to determine exactly who is responsible, what happened, and trying to bring charges forward. Sheriff PJ Tanner said that whoever is responsible, they will be held accountable. And just one last thing that I want to mention here. He said in the last year and a half, they had 24 arrests of people who have been in possession of machine guns. 24 people in just a year and a half. He says Beaufort County has a problem. It's a problem that needs to be addressed, and it's a problem that they plan to address moving forward. Of course, if you missed this press conference, as always, you can watch it right now on the WJCL 22 News app or at WJCL.com. And we will have live coverage today on this mass shooting and the latest developments. That is starting on our news at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We are going to return you now to regular scheduled programming.